All right. Hello, everyone. So let's do today's bell ringer for March 25th, 2020. Never stop doing the little things for others. Sometimes those little things occupy the biggest parts of their hearts. So, as typical with our bell ringers, you need to write down that quote, write down your response, and save that in that Google Doc to turn in at the end of the week. Now, I think this quote is very important because we are, in a situation where doing a little thing for somebody else might really make their day. So never stop doing those little things because they matter to those around you. All right. So before we go into our assignment for today, I want to go over some announcements and reminders going forward. So everybody is clear on attendance. You do need to check in daily by 2 p.m. to be counted present. As teachers, we are still required to take attendance, so I need you to be logging in by 2 p.m. and showing me that you're doing some kind of work. Now, there are a couple ways to have your attendance be, counted present. So the first is by attending your class's Zoom meeting. So all of those meeting times and the links and so on are posted in Google Classroom. So if you're able to attend those, please do so. That way I can count you present. You can also do your attendance by completing the Google form on Google Classroom by 2 p.m. Every day I have one posted, so you should be able to see it as an attachment in Google Classroom. And filling that out lets me know that you are participating and that you are logging in at a reasonable time. And the last way that you can check in for attendance is by sending me a message via Remind or email. That way I know that, hey, you may be having internet issues and you can't connect to the Google form, but you see everything and you're there. This does not mean saying, hey, I'm present and not giving me any explanation. I need to see you either troubleshooting technical issues or I need to see you, logging into those Google Forms or Zoom. The requirement is that you are active in my class for the day. Okay, so the next announcement that's there is if you have not heard, virtual school is extended to May 15th. That means we will be doing the online platform until that point. And so these requirements are still going to be in place. So be sure that you are getting that attendance grade. Okay. And lastly, please keep up with your work. That way you can still get a grade because I still am grading your stuff. Okay. So if we want to move on to the next thing. Now, we are working on Things Fall Apart. So I want to go over the culture that we are reading about very briefly. You already read an article on Actively Learn talking about Igbo culture, and so this PowerPoint is kind of to supplement different elements that may not have been in the article. The article itself discusses the government styles and other aspects of their social life. And as we know from living in a society, that is not the only things that people are concerned with. So I do want to go over their culture just so we can orient ourselves in the novel and to what we're reading. So the Igbo people are originally from southern Nigeria. So if you look on the PowerPoint in green on the African continent is modern day Nigeria. So that is a country on the west coast of Africa. This area of Africa was very heavily trafficked by Europeans looking for gold, slaves, and other commodities that are found in the African continent. So it's no surprise that the novel discusses some of those or has touches of European contact, even though the characters themselves have never seen a European. So many Igbo people still live in Nigeria. Because it is a culture, it doesn't automatically get wiped away with time. There are still traces of that culture. People still speak the native language. There are a lot of people who are still a part of that culture in Nigeria. So, part of culture is how people live, where they live, and what their family looks like. So the Igbo people did live in huts that were built out of clay and other materials like that with grass roofs. And so they weren't houses like you and I typically experience. And family units lived together in compounds, and compounds would have a bunch of different structures within them. So you would have the houses, you would have areas for cooking. Down below, it talks about barns to store yams and other food. You would have an area for livestock. It served as a little mini family village within the village itself. Now, something that we are definitely not familiar with in our own culture is the fact that men were allowed to marry multiple women and that depended upon their wealth and status. So, if you were able to afford more than one wife, you could, in theory, go out and marry another woman if you so wished. This is something important to note because once we start reading Things Fall Apart, we need to discuss Okonkwo and his marriages and his wives. However, each wife in the compound had their own hut to raise their family in. So they didn't live in one giant communal house. It was separate huts that they all lived in, and the children of each wife would live with the wife, and the husband could, go between huts whenever he wanted. However, the husband did have his own hut where he lived in by himself. So, another aspect of society that we are all familiar with are ceremonies and societal structures. So, if you want a basic definition of a ceremony, it's any kind of celebration of either religious significance or social significance. So, if we think about Newbern, some of the ceremonies that we may participate in might be Christmas if we want to talk about religious ceremonies, or the Mumfest if we want to talk about societal ceremonies. So, ceremonies for the Igbo people centered around music, dance, and feasts. So people would get together in a communal space and celebrate in that way. Different people were allowed to do different things during the ceremonies, and your class status determined what that role could be. Now, something important that we need to pay close attention to is that top ranking men wore masks during these ceremonies and during other societal practices to kind of take on the persona of an ancestral spirit as part of village life. And we'll go over this as we see it in the book, but I want you just to be conscious that this is something that happens so that when we get to that part, you're not confused. Another part that I want to discuss is the fact that men could earn what are called titles for various achievements. So these achievements could be bravery during war or economic success, farming. They were various. There were various ways to earn titles, and they were very important to that society. It was the way that men were allowed to move up in rank in their society and were allowed to do different things based on that title. It is something extremely coveted for those men. Something else that I want to talk about is the concept of chi. So you'll see this phrase used throughout the novel, and chi is just the Igbo concept of a personal god or energy that determines a person's fate or the outcome of events. They'll talk a lot about their personal chi, and so just understand it's kind of that concept of a personal energy. So I want to talk about their food and entertainment because there are a couple things that are very important here. So, music was vital to their ceremonies and it was also part of their communication. So, something that they used a lot are drums. And drums were used in ceremony to kind of keep beat with different things that they were doing. There's a part in the novel that talks about a wrestling match and they're playing drums during that. It's also a way for people to let other people know that there is a message going on, so something important, as well as using horns and other ways to grab people's attention. It's not like now where we have the news or newspapers or text messages, phone calls. They had to grab people's attention other ways. Flutes are also important because flutes are also one of the main instruments that they use in order to provide entertainment as well as grab people's attention. If we want to move on to food, the yam is the most important food item that we can talk about. A lot of their society was tied to the yam and its importance to those people. So it's a staple crop. And a staple crop is a crop that is vital to the survival of a society. Without that crop, the people would starve. And so it was very important to them to make sure that the yams grew and that they grew in enough abundance to avoid starvation. This means that a lot of their religion is revolving around the harvest, specifically the harvest of yams. We have to remember that this is an agrarian society where they are very focused on growing and maintaining crops. The second food item that I want to talk about is the kola nut. And while they may not have used the kola nut for survival, it was integral to their societal practices where you would use a kola nut when you're going out and greeting others. So we'll see in even chapter 1 of the novel, someone enters another man's hut and they share a kola nut together as part of the ritual. A lot of the society does revolve around ritual. So we need to pay attention to what is used with the rituals and how those rituals take place. So that's all I have for the culture that we're reading about. Remember, we did discuss an article that talks about the importance of understanding the historical context. And part of that is learning about the culture that we're reading about. We'll go on later in our lessons to talk about the time period that Things Fall Apart takes place in. However, part 1 of the novel really does mostly focus on the culture that the main character is a part of. All right, remember, if you have questions about anything that we're going over in these lesson videos, please attend the Zoom meeting so that you can get those questions answered. All right, have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you later.